Molly O'Brien in the Navigate Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'd like to welcome James MacGuire via Skype. James, how you doing today?
Great, Molly. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us. He's the author of Real Lace Revisited, and he'll be in Newport August 9th giving a talk about his book. So we wanted to have him join us today via Skype to give us a little preview on his book. He's also worked at Time Incorporated, the Health Network, and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, as well as having published many works in other national publications. So welcome to Go Local Live.
Thank you very much.
So your book, Real Lace Revisited, Inside the Hidden World of America's Irish Aristocracy, is kind of a bit of an update to Stephen Birmingham's 1973 bestseller, Real Lace. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your book, because it's a bit of an update, but then also a continuation and much more.
Yeah, sure. Steve Birmingham wrote a book about the early German Jewish dynasties called Our Crowd, and that was a huge success. And like any writer, he was eager to get an advance for another book. So he decided on the Irish. And in Real Lace, he wrote about the Irish families that came into prominence around the turn of the 20th century, mostly in New York and elsewhere, of course, in Boston with the Kennedys, etc. Now, funnily enough, he mentioned the Kennedys primarily to sort of leave them out because he didn't think that they merited inclusion with other Irish families because of their bad business ethics and some personal defects too. But that was 50 years ago, and now after another half century, we can see what the Kennedys have given in terms of public service to our country. And Caroline has just completed her very successful tenure as ambassador to Japan. I'll be fascinated to see what she does next. And the Kennedys are, in fact, pictured on the front of the book. There's a picture of Jackie and JFK watching the America's Cup races off Newport in 1963, just 3 months before the assassination.
Yes, and the Kennedys, one of the most prominent, well-known American families in America, one of the most prominent and well-known. What are some other families that you believe that we should know about that you've explored within the book?
Well, a few of them would be the Bradys, who actually, in this generation, include the former Secretary of the Treasury, Nicholas Brady, but whose great-grandfather helped finance the inventor Thomas E. Murray and Thomas Edison. Another one would be the Ryans, who started out as assistants to William C. Whitney, the great transit king in New York in the late 1800s. Thomas Fortune Ryan, and built a vast fortune after that. But one of the good things about the book was being able to understand how very many people had come of age in the last 50 years, like Domino's Pizza, Tom Monahan, Charles Feeney of Atlantic Philanthropies, and many women too, including Anne Sweeney and Christine O'Hara of the Disney Company. So there's a lot of new wealth, a lot of new success in the last 50 years.
Was it interesting for you to kind of delve into family lineage and history and explore that? You know, people kind of have this fascination learning our roots and learning our history, but then also kind of exploring that people are interested in kind of the tabloid sensationalism of, because we don't have a monarchy here, we don't have that royalty, so kind of looking at it from that aspect as well.
Yeah, I would say the most interesting part from my point of view, having grown up with some of these families and been one of them in my great-grandfather's time themselves, was Birmingham had this phrase called First Irish Families, which I never heard anybody refer to, and my father would have taken a whip to me if I said anything so pretentious to refer to ourselves. But the real first Irish family, which I researched and enjoyed, were the Carrolls of Maryland, who arrived in 1686. And by the third generation, Charles Carroll of Carrollton was the one Catholic signer of the Declaration of Independence, and they had vast holdings across the state of Maryland. So that was good fun.
Yeah, no kidding. It's going a long way back. Do you think that people just want to know about the history and how this country was formed and how Irish heritage has changed over time in some fashion?
Yes, I think they are, and I think the answer is that The subtitle of the book is Inside the Hidden World of America's Irish Aristocracy. I don't think anyone should be misled into thinking that the Irish came here as aristocrats at all. They all had to work their way up from a point of poverty and also suffering severe political and social rejection as they started out. But they were plucky and determined, and just as other waves of immigrants, like the Germans and the Jewish folks and who came after, they made their way and eventually, as the great phrase went, they could run the cities but could not get into the country clubs, as the Irish demonstrated their political mastery in the 1800s, but in due course they got into the country clubs too. So it was an ongoing evolution.
How much did religion play a part in the rise?
Well, it's a big part of the book, and it was not something that Steve Birmingham paid much attention to. He wasn't interested, but I don't think anyone can really appreciate the Irish experience without taking into account how primary the free expression of their and practice of their religion was. In Ireland, they could not practice their Catholicism. They had to go to school in hedgerows and go to furtively to priests for mass on the hillside. They couldn't vote, they couldn't own land, they were denied their civil rights, they couldn't own a horse. And so coming to America, that was the first thing they set out to do in what was largely a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant establishment. Even the schools were taught with Protestant Bibles and other textbooks. So the Irish set about to create their own parallel system of Catholic education in the parochial schools and colleges, not unlike Providence College or Holy Cross or Boston College, all close to you there.
Yeah, definitely. So making the mark from history up until present day. Was there anything that really surprised you learning about these families writing the book?
Well, I think all of them have had their up periods and down ticks. And what I would say was surprising was the resilience, even in the face of personal tragedies. The Irish, all stereotypes have an element of truth, and the Irish have suffered from depression and substance abuse in the past, but people keep going and come through it and do well in succeeding generations too. So that is very much, if not surprising, at least heartening to me as part of the American experience. And of course, in today's world, the Irish are, as all Americans, intermarrying more and becoming part of the great melting pot of America.
I think resilience is definitely a strong sounding point there. Definitely a much to do. Why do you think people should know about this type of history?
Well, I think it speaks to the fact that everyone in America has come from a different kind of world, whether they're African Americans or Hispanic Americans or from Europe or from Asia or Latin America. And everyone has their story, and there's a dignity and nobility to all of those stories, and it makes the success of our democracy in the past and in the present, but most of all in the future, all the more precious to us. We have to work towards it and in harmony with each other, but each of us has got to lay claim to part of their identity too.
I like that. And you mentioned you were part of one of the families in the original Real Lace. Was that kind of a shocker or kind of a mute point when your family was brought up? Was that kind of almost like, ugh?
Well, we thought it was sort of a joke, to be honest with you. As I say, this whole idea of the first Irish families, that was never an expression that anybody would have used, and the word aristocracy, coupled with Irish, is oxymoronic in the extreme. Yeah. So, but on the other hand, had the fun of going to school with some of the Buckleys and the Ryans and the McDonalds, and they all remain great friends today. And that was actually out at Portsmouth Abbey, not too far from Providence, outside of Newport, and so it was part of the experience and something that I take great pride in.
Well, that's always good to hear. So you will be here on Wednesday, I believe, giving a talk in Newport. Heard that event is at capacity, but plans to come back anytime soon?
Yeah, at the moment they have a waiting list at the Redwood Library where the talk begins at 5:30, but I check in with them because they might have found additional capacity. And then the co-sponsor is the Irish Museum in Newport, and they're very eager to have me come back and probably speak this time at the Tennis Hall of Fame at the Newport Casino. And we'll have to figure out the date for that. They're talking about the fall. But I'm always up for coming back to beautiful Newport and to wonderful Rhode Island, and love to see anybody who wants to drop by.
We would love to have you. So this book came out not too long ago, just a couple months ago. Do you have any plans for any future publications?
Well, I'm currently completing a memoir of the late 1960s, that very turbulent era when I was a teenager, and spent a good bit of it at Portsmouth Abbey in Portsmouth, Rhode Island, but also around the country at Woodstock and San Francisco and other places where exciting things were going on. And we have to find a publisher, of course, but if that happens, I hope that it'll be out next spring for the 50th anniversary of 1968, which was an extremely turbulent year with the assassinations of Martin Luther King, Bobby Kennedy, the election of Nixon over George McGovern, etc. So be interesting to revisit those times again.
What a year it was. Well, we hope to hear from you once that gets going, and would love to chat with you once again. So safe travels to Newport, and maybe you'll get a chance to stop by over at the Abbey on your way.
I will, and I'd love to see you again, Molly. It's great to talk to you. Thank you so much.
So nice to talk with you as well. James MacGuire, Real Lace Revisited, Inside the Hidden World of America's Irish Aristocracy. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your time. We'll catch up soon. Okay?